네, 안녕하세요. 저는 지금 스파크랩에서 공동 대표를 맡고 있는 이한주입니다. 오늘 이렇게 바쁘신 와중에서 찾아주신 분들께 정말 감사의 말씀드리고요. 오늘 그 포스트 코로나 시대의 투자 환경에 대해서 논의하기 위해서 정말 좋은 분들을 모셨습니다. 그래서 우선 패널리스트를 소개하고 시작하도록 하겠습니다. So from 500 startups, we have CEO and co-founder Kristen Chai. From Vertex Ventures, we have general partner In-Shik Wee. And from Notation Capital, Catherine Wu from New York City, and X Funds general partner Patrick Chung. So we have about 45 minutes today to do the discussion, and then 10 minutes of Q&A afterward. So we'll start with the first question. This Corona COVID situation is unprecedented for sure, I think personally and professionally and as an industry-wide. But I think it begs the question, is this really fun? Has this fundamentally changed the way VCs think about the world and the way we invest? Or are we going to just go right back to where we were as if nothing ever happened, maybe a year from now? So, I'll start with In-Shik. So In-Shik, what do you think?
Yeah, fundamentally, we're already back to normal in our business. And in the beginning of the COVID sort of first couple of months, there was a bit of panic and what's next. But because what COVID really forces is digital transformation at its core center. A lot of the leading industry companies who've already embraced digital transformation are finding ways to be productive in collaboration and using tools like Zoom and others. And others that are left behind now are forced to invest in digital transformation. So we're actually seeing a lot of demand for products and services, especially in the B2B and enterprise sectors. And so we've been very busy, and we've seen a lot of activity and deal flow, especially in the last 3 months, pick up and get back to the normal days of pre-COVID.
Okay, so I mean, the deal flow definitely is back to normal and maybe even better than before. But I'll come back and ask the questions about if you're looking at different types of companies because of what we experienced with COVID. So Catherine, I just wanted to get your view.
So we're in an interesting position because Notation is a very US-centric fund and especially New York focused. So traditionally we have invested mostly in New York City. And that's where, I would say 80% of our founders are. Of course, I think in COVID, it's quite unrealistic to stick to that anymore. So that's definitely forced us to also expand our geographical parameters a little bit. And I do think that speaks to kind of the new Zoom everything age that we're currently in, right? Which is that, even how this demo day is happening today, we have people from 3 different time zones. And actually the last time I was at a SparkLabs demo day, I was in Korea, and obviously I'm in New York today. So it's definitely, I think, stretched the imagination, not just on the possibilities of remote work, but in how we can also carry on with work and investment despite so many changes in our lives. But I do, however, think that there is a very central human element to the fundraising process, which I do think can get lost on Zoom, right? Because Zoom takes away some of the more natural pieces in Q&A and building a relationship. And that is quite important, I think, for early stage investors as well as founders. And so that piece, I think, is probably not happening right now, but I do think that in the long run, after COVID, that the one thing that will get back to normal is that VCs will want to meet entrepreneurs prior to making an investment decision, and entrepreneurs will likely resume some travels in order to fundraise.
Yeah, not having that face-to-face meeting and making that connection is definitely challenging. And I think we're all learning that new skill set. All right, so Patrick, what do you think?
Well, I think, of course, it's not going to go back to normal in 2 different ways. Number one, substantively, whenever there's something this ground shaking, this tectonic, substantively, the things that we're investing in are going to be much more innovative because just hugely disruptive times like this produce the most innovative, resourceful founders that are doing some amazing things. So substantively, I think we're going to see a lot of innovation come out. And then process-wise, we're also going to see just this flattening of the world that was supposed to have occurred, Thomas Friedman style a decade ago, but that has not really occurred. I was just kind of going around our neighborhood here in Palo Alto and looking at the houses for sale. And, all of these venture capitalists are moving out. And I was like, wow, that guy's leaving? And the real estate agent said, he's gone to Montana. I was like, oh my goodness, that person's leaving? Yes, they went to Idaho. And so you're going to see that flattening. And with the capital, I mean, just today, I think Joe Lonsdale wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about why he moved to Austin, Texas. And so when the capital flees, you're going to see that flattening of opportunity.
Okay. All right. So, so the venture capitalists are moving out of Silicon Valley. All right. That's good to know. Maybe it's time to buy their real estate. All right. So, Christine.
So I think very fundamentally in terms of VC investing, like I think as many people have echoed, the fundamental principle of venture capital, obviously that's not going to change. Venture is still going to continue to invest in game-changing founders and companies. And if we've learned anything from, past recessions, albeit they're not exactly like this is a very unique one, now is going to be a fantastic time to invest. So anyone who's holding back, would urge those investors to, like, now is time to put money in, because we're going to be meeting and investing in founders that are investing in, or that are creating, amazing companies down the line. But I think I would echo what Patrick said, that it's not going to go back to as if COVID never happened, because that world doesn't exist. Nothing is pre-COVID, that whole construct is gone. So I think a lot of, in terms of how we're investing, if you think about sourcing, deal flow, sourcing companies, selecting and winning those companies, and then supporting them, all four of them have seen dramatic impact. I mean, especially, for our vantage point for 500 being based in Silicon Valley, but very much a global firm, we see how the impact has been in different markets, emerging and established markets, as well as, at the early stage. So I think there's a lot of change that's happening in terms of how we source deal flow. Now, at least in most markets, and certainly here in the US, we're kind of constricted to virtual online, at least for the foreseeable future. But, in some ways that hasn't had a good impact. In some ways it has helped, at least for opening up possibilities to access deal flow, hopefully outside of your own network, in the spirit of trying to find, being limited on where you can access those deals in person. And I think the other thing in terms of like what the big changes are is just diligencing companies. I think, again, at the early stage for us, being a global firm and investing in a lot of different companies from different markets, vetting and meeting founders virtually is pretty common. But certainly there's been a lot of talk over the last few months with venture investors trying to diligence companies, especially if they're writing larger checks, taking 20% ownership, board seat, and not potentially ever having even met the founder in person, which is oftentimes very much part of that diligence piece that, Catherine spoke about, it being very much human-based and a people business. So I think it seems like, the nimble investors will find a way to get past that and not miss out on deals just because, of that limitation. But there's certainly a lot of change in kind of all those different areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this, right? I mean, whether it's 2000 dot-com crash or 2000 Lehman crisis, every time there's some kind of crisis, the economy as a society just comes roaring back. So the deals will get done, entrepreneurs will be entrepreneurs, and the VCs will be VCs. But I think, we're all kind of saying that, but the way we, even the deal flows and all that may be back to normal or even better than before. The way we look at companies and the kind of companies that we look at are profoundly impacted by this. So, just kind of going to that. So we'll start with you, Christine. So let's get to the specifics. What are some of the investment theses, or what are the companies that you're looking at now? And, you did say that different locations are responding differently. So I'd like to get some more color on that as well.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of like where we're investing now, I think in terms of the sector focus, the geographic focus, I don't think there have been really dramatic changes there in terms of we're trying to, put more capital to work in one market versus the other. I think the one change that has happened is maybe more with our flagship fund and flagship programs that now that a lot of, both with our accelerator program, being virtual first now, it does open the door a lot more in terms of allowing companies who, previously may not have been able to relocate to a very expensive city with San Francisco. Now they don't need to. So the access to the program is much easier. But aside from that, I think, we have been investing outside of Silicon Valley since the very beginning 10 years ago. So I think that doesn't really change. If anything, we'll continue to invest and lean into, Southeast Asia, Latam, Middle East, rest of US, et cetera. But I think in terms of sectors, the way that our team has been
before we go into sectors, Christine. So are you seeing any particular local market doing better than others? Like maybe like, Southeast Asia is doing better or US is doing better because of or after COVID? You could be a very short answer too.
Oh, I mean, I think it's pretty clear there are many markets that are at least handling COVID a lot better than others. So
Yeah, yeah.
definitely seeing that. In terms of if there's impact on the startup markets, I think,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's a dramatic impact, but
Okay.
certainly there's a lot of connections with how the general, population is operating.
I see. Okay. All right. So yeah, interested to hear about your sector interest.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sectors, I would assume that probably all of my fellow panelists might be seeing things pretty similarly in terms of areas where there's, at least our team has been calling kind of the accelerated future. So these are areas where there already was, change happening, but with COVID, this acceleration has happened not just, in a few months, sometimes it's been even in a matter of a few weeks. So these are, things like healthcare, future of work, productivity, education see a lot of lift, even how media and entertainment distribution is happening, logistics and supply chain. I would say all of these areas were ones where, at least for 500, because we do invest in a lot of different sectors, we're not just focused on investing in a certain vertical. We have made investments in each of these sectors over, many, many years, but we are definitely seeing existing portfolio companies in these areas doing very well, seeing a lot of tailwinds. And new deal flow coming in. There's obviously a lot of innovation that needs to happen in all of these areas. So I think that those are ones certainly where there's a lot of opportunity. And even in spaces where you just look at where's the fundamental shift happening with people and in real life, that's definitely going to translate over where do we need solutions. So definitely a lot happening.
All right. Well, so Inshik, back to you. I mean, so what are you seeing, and what types of companies?
Yeah, so we focus exclusively on B2B and enterprise for our thesis, and so a lot of it's really centered around the adoption of cloud technologies. And one of the biggest sort of success stories during the COVID era was the IPO of Snowflake, and that really kind of drew attention to the massive amounts of data processing and workloads that have been moving to the cloud. And just 5 years ago, enterprises were very skeptical of actually moving their most prized possessions, which is their enterprise data, into the cloud. But that really has become a non-event. And I think Capital One just announced, they had fully shut down all their data centers as of this year, and they've moved to the, pure cloud enabled. So having a tier one bank in the US announced publicly that they have fully embraced the cloud transformation, we're now going to see all the laggards continue to embrace and adopt that. So we're going to see some massive shifts in the power base. So we had, the traditional owners like Cisco, EMC, as well as Oracle and others. And now the new kind of the new masters are Amazon, Google. Microsoft actually still stays quite relevant on both ends of the spectrum.
You got to give it to them. They've been there since for a while now.
And they've done a great job. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity in and around what it means now to be purely virtual as an organization, but more importantly, what it means to be purely virtual in terms of where all your data resides. So I spent a lot of time really thinking about data governance and data policy as it applies to how organizations need to then respond to government requests for data. There's a lot of challenges right now with heightened security, scrutiny around cybersecurity and around data and data provenance. So that's a massive area of exploration for us, and we're seeing a lot of opportunity in people starting to do more in data governance and really taking it more seriously than just hacking and other kind of cybersecurity related events.
Yeah. I mean, I could, I like to echo that because, in my own line of business, Bespin, we're seeing that explosion of enterprise customers finally, ready to move to the cloud. And I think before they kind of all understood it here, but they still resisted the whole, adoption of cloud. But, that's no longer an option. And this COVID really just opened the floodgate. And obviously that has an impact on the startup community as well, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs. If they weren't doing it, they're definitely more interested in the B2B enterprise and all around the cloud. All right. So, Patrick, what are you seeing?
So in terms of sector, I think there are some predictable things. We have a company that helps take out restaurants, take orders over the phone called Kia. That obviously is seen a giant, huge run up in business. We have a company that provides television online through your computer called Philo. That zoomed from zero to almost $300 million. That has been just in less than 2 years, an amazing set of growth. Those things are, I think, the expected things. What really fascinates us about this period of time is the unexpected things. What interesting new sectors will be created. And one of the most interesting ones to me has been the replacement or replication of in-person interaction, something that, by the way, Korea has been really a world leader in. We have seen companies that, when I saw one called Riff Analytics, which is a plugin on Zoom, and it will just sit there in the background listening to you and provide you real-time analytics such that, hey, Patrick, every time, Christine opens her mouth, you interrupt her and you have been talking 60% of the time and you are like, you need to shut up, and that is providing a type of feedback that if we were all sitting in a room together, everyone would like start staring at me and saying, stop interrupting her. But I'm not getting that signal in this format, so I'm getting that signal through there. There's an even more sophisticated one called Chip Brain, done out of some research at MIT, which will actually analyze the facial expressions of everyone on the line and tell you, hey, when you just said that thing, Patrick, everyone went, and that means that what you said was not clear. You should go back and say it again. Or Patrick, when you asked that question just now, Insect just asked the same question 15 minutes ago. You weren't listening. And these are to provide us with that human signal that we're now missing. This sort of thing really did not exist in this type of magnitude before the pandemic. And the pandemic is what has created these types of new, I don't know what they'll be. Will they be whole sectors? Will they be, type of, empathy substrate for robotics? Who knows? But my point is, those are the interesting things that are new. All the other predictable things, of course, like, yes, we had a consumer travel company that had a really tough time through the pandemic because obviously people are not traveling anymore. But what really excites us is what is being created that's new.
Right. So it's like an assisted EQ. So finally, us VCs will actually become human beings then.
Yes, exactly. Then we'll stop interrupting people and shut up for once.
Yeah, well, that's that's something that we all definitely could benefit from. All right, Catherine, what are you seeing?
So I actually, so we invest at like the pre-seed stage, which is the very first thing. So I see things that people are starting now, right? Like things that people have started probably in the last couple of months. So all out of the pandemic. And so some of the interesting things, so kind of what Patrick was saying, so social apps are fun and hot again. So actually one of the hotter social apps this year is an app called Clubhouse, which is funded by Andreessen. It was like a very hot deal. And it was an audio social platform. And I think because partially it's that, people are staying home, you're not seeing friends, you're not meeting new people. And that also, I do think that, everyone is on TikTok these days, right? And I do think that like, even though that was gaining growth a lot in the US, I do think that part of this really excelled it. And then other things like House Party, which is a social app that's been around forever, but saw crazy growth in the beginning months of COVID. So that the social part, we're seeing a lot of really fun, iterations of what does it mean to create a virtual gathering space, right? And there's a ton of them around. So we're starting to see kind of an explosion in creative social apps again. And I think kind of adjacent to that is this explosion of tools and services around what we call the creator economy. So essentially, people probably who are perhaps laid off during COVID are kind of home sitting here. They're like, everyone has a camera these days. Everyone has access to the internet. What can I do to, sustain and focus on my own, skill set and make a living off of it? And you're seeing people, sell courses on how to, whatever it is, digital marketing. People sell, makeup. I mean, anything on the internet these days, right? And so there are all these tools created around this creator economy. And I think the last kind of two sectors that's been really interesting that I've seen popping up recently is education, but specifically, what does it mean now that all these kids are home and parents don't know what to do with them, right? What does that mean for the future of homeschool? What does that mean for the future of online school? So we're seeing a lot of very interesting experiments around there. And then I think the last piece is e-commerce. So I actually think the US is a little bit behind in Asia on e-commerce and social shopping and online shopping. And I do think that we're starting to see some more social e-commerce, which I haven't really seen the US done well. And along with that, innovations on payment, kind of all being iterated on right now. The one very big surprise for us out of our portfolio is a company called Tuxino in LA. They do rental RV vans because in pandemic, when people can't leave the country, they're renting these really decked out, Beamer RVs, and they're traveling the country. And that was like a crazy growth that we were just like not expecting at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could all agree that I don't know about the business travels. I don't know that we'll ever, I don't know that any CFO is ever going to approve any kind of business travels anymore. But from a personal traveling perspective, I think we're all dying to get out of here. So I think it's going to just come rolling back, and whether it's RV or whatever, it's going to be, reserve your plane tickets now. Hopefully the vaccine really does work. All right. So, I mean, so I think we're all agreeing that, the spirit of entrepreneurship, the startups will figure out a way. The crisis opens up doors into other venues, like what you said, Patrick, just the whole thing about, recreating that kind of face-to-face serendipitous interaction online. I think that's a huge opportunity, because I think that as a businessman, I'm a VC and an operator. One of the biggest things that I'm afraid of is that the lack of creativity, we're going to pay for it somehow a couple of years down the line, because people are not congregating and they're not sharing ideas, spontaneously. So I'm always looking for some ways for our staff to really spontaneously interact virtually. So I think that's a huge opportunity. So let's talk about very specific companies. I know, Patrick, you share some companies, but, Christine, so, any companies that you see or any entrepreneurs, that kind of catches your attention, or I know, because all portfolio companies are valuable, but just wanted to see if anybody catches your attention more than the others these days.
Oh yeah, I'll have to preface it saying this is just one of them, so I don't pick a favorite, of course. Yeah, but well, I mean, a couple come to mind, but one I think that has probably been much more relevant currently is a company that we invested in at the seed stage, is now actually just recently raised. They just announced a pretty big raise. So obviously companies are still getting funded in COVID, but it's a company called Carbon Health. So they are re-engineering kind of modern healthcare, and their primary focus is on primary care. But obviously, when the pandemic hit, it did impact things just in terms of there was a lot of not like from the medical perspective, like stopping the kind of non-urgent visits, and it was all for COVID. But they actually accelerated a lot of their plans around pop-up clinics and kind of pivoted slightly to kind of really being on top of COVID testing. And so I think there's now, from at least here in the Bay Area and a lot of places nationwide, they have been working very quickly to do pop-up clinics for largely geared around COVID tests. Obviously now, depending on where in the US you are, elective kind of visits, or, primary care is mostly resumed and back in place. Things may change now that there's a lot of surges going on in various parts of the country, including California. But in the long run, I think, they see this as kind of a much more modernized, nimble way to do healthcare. So that was actually really fascinating to see how quickly they were able to pivot and partner in a time where, that's what their patients really needed, getting access to that type of testing, and, being much more accessible and quick in terms of that turnaround, which a lot of, healthcare is not always known for that, in at least here in the US.
Right. So this is a company named Carbon Health.
Carbon, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think just watching it from abroad, that there seems to be a lot of opportunity for U.S. healthcare transformation.
Yes. Very
right.
much so.
Okay. Well, what about you, Patrick? What any specific companies? I know you already mentioned it, but do you want to
Yeah, absolutely. So the last company that we invested in the pandemic, and actually the a company that we invested in as the other, Christine and Catherine Insick said, without actually ever meeting the founders, were two Stanford rising juniors. So they were about to return to Stanford as undergraduates, but because of the pandemic, we're seeing where Exponent is a universities-based venture capital firm co-founded by NEA Excel, Harvard University. And so, that's kind of our core demographic. And these two rising sophomores at Stanford decided to take a pandemic year out. We're seeing up to 20% of returning students elect to take a year off because they're not going to get the same experience they would have gotten. They wanted to, again, to this theme of trying to replicate or replace in-person human interaction. They wanted to recapture that feeling of how do I miss my friends. I spent years with these friends and now they're scattered to the ends of the earth. They created something called Lighthouse. And the URL is Lighthouse, the app, which I'll put into the chat. But it's so deceptively simple. And like most early stage stuff, who knows how it's going to work. But right now, in order to have serendipitous contact with people, I have to call up my friend Insick and say, Insick, it's been such a long time. Shall we catch up over a Zoom drink? And then we'll go back and forth and we'll set a time and I'll send him a link. And then at the appointed hour, we'll get on, we'll do our call, we'll have our drink, we'll have our social time. And then at 6 p.m., we'll leave. If you want to call someone, of course you can call someone, but it's so awkward if I call someone and say, hey, Christine, I just wanted to chat. And Christine is like making dinner and her people are yelling in the background. She may think, I don't want to talk to you now, Patrick. I just don't want to talk to you now. It's too busy. So in Lighthouse, it's such an easy thing. You turn on your light. Your light is on or off. Your light on means I'm receptive. I would like to chat with you if you want to chat with me. If your light is off, it's off. And so when you flick it on, all of a sudden you have all your friends and you know whose door is open, whose door is not open. You just pop in and have video chat with them. It has taken off like wildfire at Stanford, at the virtual Stanford, because all of these kids are searching for that experience. And so that's one that we have been very, very excited about. Again, because the founders exactly know their problem. It's born of the pandemic. And you can imagine how it's going to, last beyond that.
Serendipity, that's really key. All right, Injik, enterprise, IT, B2B, come on. There's lots of interesting stuff. What's catching your attention these days?
Like on the portfolio side, I think we have a fairly fast-growing company called VGS, stands for Very Good Security, and they tokenize data so that your sensitive data doesn't actually even leave the enterprise. In fact, they store the sensitive data for you. So a bank doesn't even send a credit card; they send a token to another bank. So they have a lot of the neobanks and the new fintech companies in the U.S., such as like Brex, as customers, and Visa and Goldman Sachs were also investors in the last round. And this is a way to facilitate the most secure transactions, which is not sending any data, right? And so they are actually now brokering powerful transactions for a lot of the nouveau fintech companies. And globally there right now, fintech is one of the hottest areas of innovation, because people aren't going into banks anymore. Everyone is basically doing payments and processing all on their phones, and this is one where VGS is now powering a lot of these core essential transaction services, much like the old networks like Visa and MasterCard did back in the days. So that's an exciting growth story for us.
But I mean, I want to stay with you just for a moment, because I think these type of technologies, while exciting to geeks like us, I mean, might not catch the imagination of the general masses. But I think with the Snowflake, what was different was that Warren Buffett invested. That was huge kind of wake up call to the rest of the world. So, put that into context. BSG, okay, tokenization of data. I mean, that's pretty esoteric, but it is.
What is Visa worth? What is the worth of Visa as a company, right? Visa is a trusted network brand. They don't own the credit card. They're not storing the money. They're not the bank, right? So they're facilitating the trust brokering between you and whoever you're trying to, conduct transactions with. but they're the guarantee. They're the trusted brand by saying this person with this Visa label is someone you can actually transact with and give someone on credit, right? And then there's a credit card issuer that's actually doing the work, but the network facilitation is really what powers this opportunity. And so they're the trust broker. So I think that's really kind of the most powerful concept here is a trusted brand is what you want to become in these kind of transactions. And so we think with the new digital finance capabilities out there, there will be new digital banks, and then there will be new digital trust brokers.
And then do you, let me just ask you this. Do you think that digital currency will become a norm in about 5 years' time?
Digital currencies already kind of getting enough steam. I think that the challenge is the acceptance portion of it and the remittance of it being less more fluid and less cumbersome. Right now I think it's opaque and it's not very easy. So I mean, one of the big issues here with things like cryptocurrency is, does decentralization really work, or do you actually need a trusted intermediary? So who's actually brokering whose trust? And that goes to the root of the fundamental kind of the established order of financial services. Like banks exist because they're a broker of trust. So I think that's fundamental, but I think we're going to see more and more prevalence of new types of digital assets for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a bank CEO yesterday here in Korea, and because of COVID, they're really doing more and more, virtual interaction with their clients. And one of the just basic stuff that they have to solve is like know your client. So that's a big thing in the banks these days. And if you don't see them, it used to be that I could, the customer walks in, so I know you are a real person. But now that you got to do it virtually, they're going to change the whole concept of know your client, KYC. So, it is a fundamental shift, and there's lots and lots of opportunities on the B2B side as well. Summary. So once again, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for taking their valuable time to participate. And so I want to just give a round of applause. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank 여기 오신 분들한테도 감사하다는 말씀을 전하도록 하겠습니다. 예, 감사합니다. Hey, thanks guys. Hey, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Hope to see you in person very soon.
Yeah, hope to see you in person next time.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.